Okay, so without any further ado, to start off today's presentation, we will first hear from Stefania Bastianello on person with ALS and the revocation of informed consent pursuant to Law 219 from 2017. Thank you, Stefania.
Good morning, everyone. Let me thank you for inviting me to this conference. It's a pleasure for me to be here, and my objective is to tell you about the position paper, the person with ALS, and the revocation of informed consent pursuant to Law 219. Background information is to meet the need emerging from the community of people with ALS. AISLA, Associazione Italiana Sclerosi Laterale Amiotrofica, considered necessary to prepare a position paper on the right to exercise the revocation of consent as provided for by Law 219. And the document has been prepared by a working group including experts with a nationally recognized expertise on Law 38, that is the Italian law about palliative care, and Law 219, that is the law about informed consent. This is the formal part of the law that I think it's important to read together. Article 1, paragraph 5, any person who is capable of acting has the right to refuse in whole or in part any diagnostic or medical treatment indicated by a doctor for her or his pathology or individual acts of treatment. She or he also has the right to revoke the consent at any time, even if the revocation means the interruption of the treatment. For the purposes of this law, artificial nutrition and artificial hydration are health treatments, as they consist in the administration of nutrients by means of medical devices upon medical prescription. Following paragraph indicates that the physician is obliged to respect the patient's expresses the will to refuse or renounce health treatment, and consequently is exempt from civil or criminal liability. So regarding this paragraph, I would emphasize that the physician is obliged, not only invited. So let's move to recommendation. Recommendation number 1. It is recommended that healthcare staff deepens their knowledge of the disease through specific documented training with nationally recognized teachers regarding its evolution, care issues, and therapeutic choices. This is the prerequisite for a coherent revocation of consent path. The term of consistency should be announced by this statement. Withdrawal of consent is a level of care to be guaranteed. ALS may be characterized by manifestation of dementia, frontotemporal dementia, personality disorders, and psychoemotional liability. A neurocognitive evaluation is necessary both at the diagnosis and during the course of the disease. And therefore, ALS Diagnosis and Treatment Center must carry out the neurocognitive assessment, even with the cognitive or psychoemotional disorders that could compromise an autonomous decision-making process. It is necessary to carry out an appropriate communication process with the sick person to understand his or her wishes. Now, let's move on the second recommendation, that is the following. It is highly recommended that an aware and informed consent is achieved in suitable spaces and conditions, even by means of using procedures, brochures, or other means of communication that facilitate the knowledge and the revocation of consent path. What can be emphasized in this statement is that communication of therapeutic choices is a specific competence that each professional must have. Communication of the path of choices must be indicated in the health documentation. Structured and multidisciplinary communication involving the integrated team of the different treatment setting is essential to outline an appropriate and valid response even for people with cognitive and or psychoemotional disorders. Recommendation number 3, it is highly recommended that every territory identify an integrated and trained team for the elaboration of choices and of the revocation of consent. Let's continue with some other remarks on this third recommendation. The healthcare professional who collects the request for the revocation of consent from the sick person must involve the professional in her or his area who are responsible for the new planning of the treatment and revocation of consent. Palliative care should be involved when the sick person expresses the will to withdraw consent in accordance with Article 2 of Law 219. I would like to remember that in this reference is made to allow, we are no longer in the field of a recommendation. And finally, the revocation of an informed consent requires the identification of an integrated team of palliative care professionals that take the role of care management, this is very important, together with other care professionals. Recommendation number 4, it is highly recommended that the revocation process should be subject to structured reprocessing times without incurring unjustified and damaging waiting periods. Again, the adjective highly indicates that it seems important to highlight that it's necessary to allow time to reprocess the request by the sick person, verifying its reiteration. When this should happen, during the reprocessing time, because it may be necessary to re-evaluate the level of decisional competence of the sick person through neurocognitive and or psychiatric analysis in case of psychoemotional and behavioral changes. Organizational aspects or sharing issues within the integrated team or conflict between family members must not delay the revocation process. And also, if there is a conflict within the professional team, it should be managed with the professional outside the team, such as other palliative care professional or a bioethicist, until the involvement of the tutelary judge under Law 219. Again, we can see a strong reference to the Law 219. Recommendation number 5, a specific format of the revocation of consent expressing the process implemented to obtain the informed consent is highly recommended. We are not talking about a general format, but about a specific formalized document. Recommendation number 6, specific knowledge, previous experience, and or sharing of past with expert revocation of consent team and a traced training on informed consent are highly recommended. The point number 6 is very important because the palliative care team must have skills corresponding to the full implementation of Law 38 and Law 219, and the lack of competence does not justify the non-implementation of the revocation of consent. Recommendation number 7, it is highly recommended that the integrated team take a responsibility for an in-depth assessment of the chosen place of care for the revocation of consent and can avail of psychological support at all stages. So what about the setting? The place of treatment are unimportant. and the place of treatment, current or chosen by the sick person, is suitable for revocation, but it may be changed only if the integrated teams or family member consider it to be inadequate due to risks and suffering relating to the sick person and or family members. The risk is not only related to physical or logistical aspects, and finally, psychological support is fundamental during the process of revocation of consent and after its implementation, addressed both to family members and to the professionally involved. Recommendation number 8 is linked to the transparency of communication and indicates that advanced and transparent communication of the process in progress is recommended to the competent offices. Organizations providing palliative care services need to draw up a specific document authorizing the revocation of consent under Law 219, and the competent ASL, this is the various different names of the Italian territorial health authorities, must be informed on the revocation process in place. And now let's talk also about the importance of spreading this principle to all possible levels of stakeholders. Recommendation number 9, a capillary activity of promotion and divulgation of this document by ISLA is recommended. So ISLA, the promoter of this document, is aware of the role of evolution and structuring of care processes and has a role of promotion, diffusion and information of the sick person's right to exercise the revocation of consent. And the last one, recommendation number 10, it is recommended that the clinical bioethical competencies of the existing ethics committees be expanded. The ethics committees should also acquire expertise in clinical ethics in addition to those already aimed at conducting trials. In Italy, in fact, the ethics committees deal almost exclusively with trials. It is therefore necessary to train on the clinical aspects related to the need complexity. And then thank you very much to all members of the working group. Thank you to Carlo Brunori, Vanna Chessa, Amelia Conte, Marta De Angelis, Roberta Morini, Nicola Musca, Laura Rigotti, Daniela Cattaneo, the work group coordinator, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Stefania, for that wonderful presentation and for sharing the Italian colors as well. It was a very important and sometimes very difficult topic. So unfortunately, Stefania's connection today is not that stable, so she won't be able to answer your questions live, but she will be happy to receive them by email, just to let you know.